What scares me the most is what we will do for love. A connection can easily lead to a confession. And the worst part is, some don't care. Thank you for clicking on this video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today we're going to be talking about the Lonely Heart serial killers. Now, Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck together became the Lonely Heart killers by murdering supposedly up to 20 women. They were an American serial killer couple that showed that even before online dating, finding love was just as dangerous. And sometimes it meant finding your end. Please thumbs up to let me know you guys like my true crime videos, and let's get back to the story. Now, Martha very well could have been one of Raymond's first victims, but instead decided to join him. But it all started with a Lonely Heart ad, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a way back in the 1900s that they asked for love. They couldn't do online profiles like we do, so it would go in the Lonely Hearts column where they could then write letters to each other if they were interested, or just people reading the newspaper could find people they were interested in. So it was basically like online dating without the online part. Martha was a nurse at the time. She was a single mother of 2, and she just wanted to find someone to help her and love her. So she wasn't originally going to do it because actually some of her nursing friends said it as a joke that she should put a lonely ad in the newspaper, and then after a while she decided, yeah, she actually did want to. So she wrote it, and a man named Raymond answered. Now, Raymond was a man that had come from Spain to the US just a few years prior, and had actually left his wife and 4 kids behind. But Martha did not know any of that at the time, and she also was unaware that Raymond was using the Lonely Heart ads as a scam. He was using the most wealthiest women, getting them to fall for him, and then stealing all of their money and running. So they started talking for about a 2-week period where Raymond asked Martha for a lock of hair. Now, this was for some darker reasons that we'll get into later, but she just thought it was kind of like a token piece that he wanted of her, just a little piece of her. So she sent a piece of her hair in an envelope. And this entire time she had been telling him that she was a nurse, she had sent nursing pictures, so he was thinking she was some big rich woman that he was going to steal all this money from, when in fact she was doing okay, but not rich in the slightest. And so after 2 weeks, Raymond came to Florida, where she was staying, to meet her and her 2 children. After a few days, they had been sexually active and they had been in love, or so Martha thought. And when he went back home, Martha was under some strange impression that Raymond was proposing to her, that they were going to get married, when in fact Raymond just wanted her money. So she told all of her friends about this, and when he got news that this is what she was thinking, he immediately told her the truth and said, look, I don't know where you got this from, but I'm not proposing to you. And she actually attempted suicide. It did not work, fortunately, but once Raymond caught news of this, he decided to invite her to stay with him in New York. So Martha at this time was 27, Raymond was 33, and they got together in New York and had a fine time together. And Martha was very insecure growing up and as an adult, and was very insecure about her weight, and it didn't seem like Raymond really cared about that, when in fact he only cared about the money. So no, he didn't care about her weight at all. But Martha was falling head over heels for this man, and when she went back home to Florida, she actually got fired from her job for unknown reasons, and that is when Raymond said that she could come live with him, but under one condition: the kids don't come. Like I said before, he had left his own 4 kids back in Spain, so kids were not something he either wanted or wanted to deal with in the moment, and Martha, being completely smitten at this time, did as he asked and left her 2 children at a Salvation Army and moved to New York. Raymond decided to go ahead and tell Martha about what he had been doing about conning the Lonely Heart women in the ads, and instead of running away or being angry at him like she should have, She was completely almost brainwashed by his love at this point that she decided to help him. It wasn't even like he asked. She put forward the idea of helping with these cons. Now, Raymond had supposedly previously robbed many women, and even one older woman. He had really gotten her to trust him, and then once he got close enough, he cleared her entire bank account. There's also another account that possibly a woman that was found dead in a hotel was one of his first victims. She had placed a Lonely Heart ad, and it is supposedly said that that could have been his first kill. Now he had Martha, who would do anything for him and was about to make all of this so much easier, unfortunately. So Martha began posing as Raymond's sister-in-law, and they began combing through the lonely ads section of the newspaper and finding possible victims of their next robbery. But what Raymond didn't know is that Martha had an anger problem. And whereas he thought things were about to get easier, they were about to get much darker and much harder for him. But at first, everything was going very smoothly. Raymond was going by Charles Martin, and everyone was believing that Martha was his sister. The women would feel very comfortable going over to his house, knowing that there was another woman nearby, because, you know, there's strength in two. And unfortunately, their trust was betrayed by Martha, because Martha had no intention of helping them with anything. So they had gotten away with robbery after robbery, doing this in New York City, and there have been accounts, and they have gloated about accounts of murder that had happened of these victims. But one that we definitely know of for sure happened 2 years later. So Martha's anger was getting completely out of hand at this point. She was doing everything she possibly could to keep the women from having sex with Raymond, because of course that's her boyfriend, even though they didn't know that. So she would get very jealous, and even though she knew that this was a con and that they were just doing it to get money, she couldn't contain herself. 66-year-old Janet Faye had posted a Lonely Heart ad, and they had spent much time gaining her trust, and she actually got engaged to Raymond. She knew as Charles Martin. He had taken her to their Long Island apartment in New York, where Martha was staying with them. And one night, Janet went out to the couch where Raymond was sleeping and decided that she wanted to have sex with him. When Martha came out and saw Janet naked, even though Raymond had told her no, knowing what Martha would think, the sight of her naked body on the couch made Martha snap. So she crept into the room and smashed Janet Faye's head with a hammer. This did not kill her, but at this point they had already done so much damage that I guess they thought they would have been caught. So they finished the job by strangling her. And they put Janet's body in a trunk at first, and then 2 weeks later they rented a house and buried it in the basement and covered it with cement. So they had gloated many times that before all of this they had murdered, they had robbed, and they had always gotten away with it, but this time they were going to make a huge mistake. You see, Janet's family thought she was having this whole new life in Long Island with Raymond, so they didn't really check in that often. But Raymond and Martha decided to go ahead and cash her checks that she had taken out of the bank when she had moved. So they decided to cash her checks, and they also decided to write letters back home to the family with a typewriter. What they didn't know, and that the family of Janet did know, is that Janet never owned a typewriter and never learned to type. So as soon as they got this letter, they called the police. So the Lonely Heart killers knew they had to leave, and quickly. They packed everything up and headed the 12 hours away from New York to Michigan. It's undisclosed whether this was predetermined or it was just by chance, but unfortunately for a woman named Delphine Downing, this is where they landed. It was a town called Wyoming Township, and this is where they met a young woman with a 2-year-old daughter. Delphine Downing. Obviously, they're very good at conning and charming women, and Raymond got in with Delphine right away, and Delphine was a single mother, just like Martha, who just wanted someone to love her, so she allowed them to stay in her home. She lived in a suburb of Grand Rapids, and at first she was kind of just going along with everything, but she became very suspicious of this brother and sister duo and wouldn't immediately marry him. And this was a good thing because they wanted to get all of her money, secure her funds, and then leave. But she did not want to do that. So they had to wait it out for quite a while. And this was really getting under Martha's skin. So around February 28th of 1949, it is said that Delphine got really worked up. And it is speculated that that is because she had really started to see their lies. She walked in on Raymond, who had previously been wearing, and for all she knew had lots of hair, but he had actually been wearing a toupee the entire time. She walked into the bathroom, he wasn't wearing it, it was laying on the counter, and this enraged her. She called him a fraud, she didn't believe anything they were saying, and so Raymond decided to give her some sleeping pills to calm her down. But remember, she had a 2-year-old baby, her daughter named Rainelle. At this point, this baby was screaming and crying and didn't have her mother. And Martha was getting sick of the crying and decided to strangle the baby. The baby survived but had bruises all over its neck. And Raymond at this point knew, well, Delphine can't wake up and see this baby with bruises, so he shot her while she was sleeping. They stayed a few more days in this home, and the baby just kept crying because it wanted its mother. So that's when Martha took her to the basement and drowned that little baby in a little basin of water. So then they did what they had always done and buried the bodies in the basement, this time of their own home. The killers did not do much preparation or research about their victims because the Downings were super close with their neighbors, who after a few days realized that they hadn't seen them, and they called the police just to make sure they were okay. Unknown to the killers, the police showed up at the front door and found not the Downings like they were supposed to, but their killers and a makeshift grave. Although there was plenty of evidence, DA Robert McComb still wanted a confession, so he told them that they would not be expedited to New York, because at the time in Michigan there was no death penalty, but in New York City, if you were tried for murder, you would be executed. So he promised them they would not be moved back to New York, and they both confessed not only to killing the Downings, but to killing Janet Faye back in New York. The whole confession was 73 pages of gruesome detail on both ends. But even though the DA promised, they were extradited back to New York. And they got them there by New York Governor Thomas Dewey, who told the prosecutors he would get rid of the charges for the Downings if they could be extradited back to New York to have trial in New York. So the trial began shortly after on June 9th of 1949. Martha and Raymond now refused to confess to any of the murders. While they were on trial, they took back, recanted their statements of killing Janet or the Downings, and also the previous 17 to 20 murders that they had gloated about before. Raymond said that the only reason he confessed was that he thought it would help Martha get out of it, and so he was recanting it now because it wasn't true. The media in New York made this trial a huge public interest because instead of going into detail about the killings and the bad things that these people had done, they went into their love story and their strange sexual endeavors. Now, this was mostly due to the testimony on Raymond and Martha's side, both going into obscene detail about their love life, while they were basically trying to prove insanity and that love made them go insane and do it. During the trial, Martha actually was headed to the witness stand when she abruptly turned, ran to Raymond, held his face in her hands, and kissed him, leaving red lipstick all over his face in an attempt to look smitten or like obsessed, which I do think she was. On the stand, Martha confessed to 4 attempts of suicide and said that she kind of blacked out during the killings. A psychiatrist said that she was mentally unsound and that if she did participate in the killings, she had no idea what she was doing. While also trying to prove insanity on Raymond's side, he said that he had nothing to do with Janet's death and that it was all on Martha because she was in a jealous fit of rage. But the prosecutor, Edward Breslin, came forward after they tried to prove their insanity for so long, and he just straight up had a presentation of the blood-curdling facts of what these people did and didn't even go near the insanity part. He just straight up put the facts out of what they did. And after that, the judge, Ferdinand Pecora, looked to the jury and said this: "That kind of abnormality does not in and of itself constitute the kind of insanity which will excuse a person of a criminal act." After 44 days of trial, it went to the jury, and they debated for 12 and a half hours on the confessions back in Michigan, on the evidence shown in court, and they found both Martha and Raymond guilty of first-degree murder. And like I had said before, in New York, the death penalty was mandatory. But while in jail, of course, they tried to fight it, and many people had actually denied their request at getting help or getting a different trial. The New York State of Appeals denied the pair a new trial. Governor Thomas Dewey turned down a plea for clemency. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to view the case, and Raymond, who said he received cruel treatment in the Sing Sing prison, was denied a habeas corpus order. I know that the victims that were possibly never found or never confessed to by the Lonely Heart Killers and never got their justice, at least these people who could have possibly done it to them and done so many horrible things, they lived a miserable life at the end, and their lives were cut short just as their victims were. But Janet Faye got her justice on March 8th of 1951. Raymond went first, and then Martha, and they were both executed by electric chair. Even though they had both been caught cheating on one another in prison, they still had feelings for each other in the very end, and their last words kind of proved that. Raymond said, "I want to shout it out. I love Martha. What do the public know about love?" And Martha said, "My story is a love story, but only those tortured by love can know what I mean. I am not unfeeling, stupid, or moronic. I am a woman who has had a great love and always will have it. Imprisonment and the death house has only strengthened my feelings for Raymond." So up until the very end, they were either trying to continue proving that love made them insane, or it actually did. I mean, they say that love makes you do crazy things, but is that an excuse to kill, as they were trying to prove? So why were Raymond and Martha like this? How could they prey on women who were just trying to find love and have no sympathy for them? Sometimes I think that those answers lie in somebody's past, and I'm going to tell you a little about theirs. So Raymond was born December 17th of 1914. He had a pretty normal upbringing. He was a pretty good, nice kid. He, of course, I told you, got married and had 4 kids in Spain, which he then left behind later. But he had worked in the British Merchants Marine in World War II and also the British intelligence, and he was overall pretty normal. But Martha, on the other hand, had a pretty troubled life her entire life. She was born May 6th of 1920 and had gone through puberty much older than everybody else, and this was said to be due to her being extremely overweight. She has said that she was sexually assaulted by her brother, and when she told her mom this, she unfortunately blamed it on Martha. So she decided to run away as a teen, and her entire life she went to nursing school, and it was just a battle between her weight and a job. Nobody thought that an overweight person could be a nurse and could handle that, and so she struggled keeping one and finding one. She was a very lonely girl who seeked out sexual endeavors wherever she could, and she eventually became impregnated by a man who did not want a baby and refused to marry her. Devastated at this news, she moved away from that area to a whole different area to have her daughter, her first daughter. And she told everyone there that her husband, the baby's daddy, was a serviceman that died. It was all a lie, but everybody felt so bad for her. Shortly after she had her daughter, she got impregnated by a different man, Alfred Beck. He agreed to marry her, but 6 months after she had their son, he divorced her. But during all this time, What was Raymond doing? How did he get to such a dark end? Well, after a while of being in the British intelligence, he needed a new job. So he decided to go from Spain to the US, and on this ship, a steel hatch actually fell on his head. And this is said to have injured his head incredibly and possibly fractured his frontal lobe. When that frontal lobe is damaged, it's said to make a person do things that they would have never done before. And the people that knew him before said that everything about him changed after this incident. He was in the hospital for a few months, and as soon as he got out, he actually went and stole clothes from a store and then was immediately imprisoned for a year. And this is where his cellmate got him into even worse things. He got him into black magic and voodoo, and he became obsessed with it and says that this is how he charmed all of the women. And this is why he took the locks of hair. He wanted the locks of hair from these people so he could curse them in a way into falling for his charm, so he could rob them. So you let me know, do you think that past trauma is an excuse for insanity? Or do you think that they were wrongly convicted? Do you think that they were insane and therefore shouldn't have been executed, only put into a mental facility? And also, do you think that Raymond's head injury could have changed something in him? But that's kind of scary to think that one blow to the head and you could be a murderer, if it is that way, you know? I think it just kind of angers me, first of all, that somebody could do these awful crimes over and over again and not feel bad about it. But secondly, that these two people, this couple that claimed to be so in love, preyed on people who just wanted that very thing. And this is what they got instead. It saddens me so much. I just want to take a moment to really think about those people and as victims and as real people. That think about it, if you were to go on an online dating site and go on a date and then be robbed or be murdered because you wanted to find love. But there have been many books and movies that have retold this serial killer story, including one by John Travolta, or has John Travolta in a 2006 movie, Lonely Hearts. I haven't watched it, but if you have, let me know down below if it's any good or close to the story at all. As much as I do like researching serial killers and their mind and how it works is so interesting to me, it does get to me when you think deeply about the victims. And as much as I want to distance myself from these cases to keep myself sane and keep myself my mental health well, you do sometimes have to stop and think, this isn't just a case I'm putting out for fun. These were people. Martha was also quoted saying, in the history of the world, how many crimes have been attributed to love? It's scary how much that could be true, but I also don't believe that that's a reason to not be punished for your crimes. But you let me know down below what you think. And please remember to thumbs up if you like hearing me talk about true crime, and subscribe and share to spread these cases. I'll let you guys go. Bye.
Being in love is fine, but if it's bringing you to the brink of insanity, that's where you should draw the line.